Disgraced celebrity gardener Don Burke told Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce he would reveal to the media his criticisms of an embattled government agency unless the coalition followed through on reforms of the organisation. Documents released by the Senate on Wednesday show Mr. Burke became increasingly frustrated as Mr. Joyce apparently failed to respond to requests for information about an advisory board for the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, amid its controversial relocation to Mr. Joyce's electorate of New England. But on Wednesday Mr. Burke denied his relationship with Mr. Joyce was ever strained by the matter, saying he adored the Nationals leader. Mr. Burke, who faced a series of allegations he indecently assaulted, sexually harassed and bullied female employees and guests during his time presenting Burke's Backyard, claimed in a June letter that he publicly defended Mr. Joyce against criticism of the authority's forced move to Armidale in northern New South Wales, and would be forced to go public if he did not hear back about the structure of a proposed 5-person advisory body by July this year. The former TV host was instrumental in setting up the authority, known originally as the National Registration Authority, and suggested improvements to Mr. Joyce in late 2016. Earlier this year, Mr. Burke said he was frustrated he had not heard back from Mr. Joyce or his department about progress of reforms, despite attracting criticism over his public support for the controversial government decision. While I strongly want to support you, I really need to hear from you by the end of July, otherwise my conscience will force me to discuss this entire matter in the media the next time that I am contacted by them, he wrote. I would regard it as my public responsibility to point out the shortcomings of the APVMA and my inability to have the reinstatement of an independent board, but it is not something I want to do. He said he supported Mr. Joyce based on the fact that I trusted you as a savvy minister who would not be easily yes-ministered by those around him. Mr. Joyce responded on July the 24th, acknowledging Mr. Burke as a former authority board member and outlining government legislation, suggesting Mr. Burke contact his senior advisor in future. Mr. Burke told Fairfax Media on Wednesday that when Mr. Joyce asked him to publicly support the authority's move to Armidale in November 2016, the celebrity said this would depend on the government re-establishing an external advisory board. However, he said while he told Mr. Joyce he would also like to serve on that board if the government decided to appoint him, it would have been wrong to make his public support for the authority contingent on receiving the position. I thought that would be arrogant and bumptious, he said. Mr. Burke denied there was tension and said he never doubted Mr. Joyce would follow through by re-establishing the board, which he believed was needed to make the authority less risk-averse in taking toxic chemicals off the market. He described Mr. Joyce as a good friend.